Welcome back to Masters Tour Asia Pacific. I'm Raven, joining me is Sottle, and we are going to bring you the first match from the final round of Swiss for this tournament. It's very, very exciting, and it's going to be Muzzy versus Lee as well. So also, the guys were just looking at the, say, the top 16 that we've got at the moment, and I'm excited to just see how this one's going to play out and what this top 8 is going to look like for tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm super happy that we get to follow Muzzy here because I was pretty jealous that Derek and Lorinda were getting to cast Muzz in that previous series because he was playing so well. There's just something that gets me super hype about watching really great players playing great, and I think that's what we were watching before. And the face attack with the Zephyrus, I was just freaking out. It's just the kind of play I love so much. It was three free damage that 99.999% of Hearthstone players would not have seen, and Muzzy absolutely identified it, which was brilliant. The Shadow Step setup towards the end was great, even though it didn't end up mattering.
Right.
So I'm super hyped to see if Muzzy can keep up that standard of play for another series, lock himself a spot in our top 8. But on the other side, we have a Chinese representative in Lee, who is breaking out a pretty storied reputation for himself as well.
Yeah, I think in general, a lot of the Chinese players have really shown up to this tournament and have really put on some great performances so far. We'll have to see if how many of them, if any, make it into top 8 at the end of this round, of course. But just look at these two players now. Both warriors are going to be banned out. That leaves the Demon Hunters available for both. What do you think, Saul, about these Demon Hunters being played maybe as much as they are in this weekend, or at least in the top cut this weekend?
Yeah, I talk a lot about my theoretical lineups going into tournaments, and I will confess that I would not have brought Demon Hunter to this tournament, but having seen the way things have played out, I think I would have been wrong in that assessment. I think Demon Hunter once again surprised me with just how well it can react to the nerfs. I think it's in a pretty comfortable spot. It's not blowing anything out right now. But I still think it's looking pretty great with the way these players have adjusted the builds to still be effective. I know there's a lot of hype in particular around Alatemu's build with the Cobalt Spellkin coming in as well. So we will wait and see what the dominant build of the Tempo Demon Hunter turns out to be. But outside of that, I think these are the other two big talking point decks at the tournament, Rogue and Hunter. Rogue, I just checked again before we came on, is still holding its position as the highest win rate class in the tournament right now. That is a class that I would have chosen to bring to this tournament. So I guess 50% hit rate out of those two, Rogue and Demon Hunter, isn't too bad. I guess I'll take that and move on.
No, and I would agree. I think I was speaking to Derek earlier about this, and I think I would have gone the no Rogue but Demon Hunter style. And it sounds like you might have gone the other way, so it's just kind of funny when our powers combine, we get a good lineup. But yeah, so far it's looking pretty good. For me, it really is just the Druid is the big question for me on Lee. Obviously, it's been doing so well because he's at this point in the tournament, but I just feel that Druid almost takes a lot of the game out of your own hands, and that might be a bit harsh, but I think so much of it is reliant on getting that ramp early on and then following it up with a very quick threat that it's a fairly straightforward deck to pilot. I don't want to take that away from anyone who's piloting it well. It's just a lot of the games we see it win, it kind of just does it by itself half the time, right? And then when it loses, it's because maybe it's not got to its threat, maybe it's just not got to its ramp.
Listen, I am no fan of Druid, but it is my contractual obligation to disagree. I will play devil's advocate. I do think, there's a certain amount of games that you win automatically with Druid. But honestly, that's just kind of the sign of a good Hearthstone deck. I think any good Hearthstone deck kind of has that ability to just blow out games and just play a solitaire game if you get the perfect draw. But I do think as we saw Grandmasters progress, there was a lot of positions where, players were making decisions and maybe us as casters weren't even catching it as well, but there was discussion between the strong Druid players pointing out mistakes and things that could have been done differently that would have changed the win rate of the deck, that would have won games that were lost, or that, or vice versa. So I do still think there is potential in the deck to, for a top player to really separate themselves from the pack.
Right, and maybe the case is that it's just harder to see the plays because what it does just looks so powerful when it goes well, right? With just ramping into big threat turns, it looks so straightforward. Maybe right, maybe we are just missing some of the more intricacies of the list. So looks like there was a few connection things there, just make sure everything's okay, but with the lovely reconnect feature, it's not a big deal. Mulligans look like they have happened, and although there's a Glowfly, there isn't much else in Lee's hand.
Yeah,
Never mind.
Glowfly Swarm is certainly the go-to card, though, but Lee is going to need some ramp or a Fungal Fortunes at least to be able to support that and get that up nice and beefy, because the aggression is going to come in pretty thick and fast for Muzzy based on this hand that he's got here. We saw the threat of the Bone Chewer Brawler in Muzzy's previous series and the round 8 wrap-up, and it's looking like a very similar hand here, although there isn't the Guardian Org Merchant to go alongside it to make it into that absolutely terrifying minion early in the game.
Not yet, anyway. But yeah, it is a combo I really like. Where do you fall on the Amani Berserker as well? Do you think that's, if Bone Chew's in the list, they can make it too, or do you think that's a little bit too overkill?
I do like the support for Guardian Orc Merchant. I think if that card is coming into your deck, you do want a couple of cards to really pay it off. Obviously, the card is just fine. Like, if you land it on a Frozen Shadow Weaver and get a value trade with a Divine Shield or whatever else, that's great. But I think, the games that we saw, like the one from Muzzy, where you do hit it on an enraged minion and just absolutely run away with the game, like, they do happen if you give yourself that opportunity. So I do kind of like it, to be perfectly honest.
And I actually really like this play from Muzzy as well with the coin, because this also, he had a good follow-up turn no matter what. And this also gave him the opportunity to draw the Orc Merchant this turn and have an insane turn, right? He could have played either of the other 1-drops and the Orc Merchant to push an insane level of damage.
That Innovate draw is enormous, though. That means Lee is potentially in with a shout here if he wants to innovate out Glowfly Swarm to compete with this board state next turn. Otherwise, might have just been looking a little bit too slow. Does now have multiple options with those overgrowths, though, if he wants to go ramp, but looks like he is going to have to respond to the damage sooner rather than later.
Unfortunately for Lee, he did discard his Emerald, which, although not an issue with not having the minion, but more an issue of having one less spell in hand, just to make that Glowfly a little bit bigger, depending on what he draws next turn as well. If he does go for the Innovate.
Spell next turn, he's going to get, a 6-minion Glowfly if he innovates out Glowfly Swarm, which, it could have been the difference between the full board and not, I suppose, if he'd have drawn a 3rd minion off the Fungal Fortunes.
It's only small, but how aggressive Muzzy's opening has been, I think one extra minion is going to be quite a big deal.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Okay. If you're not going to get the early ramp turns smoothly or you're getting aggro down, Glowfly into Glowfly is actually a pretty powerful follow-up here from Lee.
Hey, see the Warglaives of Azzinoth. Because Lee has innovated it out, it's not going to have the impact it would have regardless. But if this had curved out naturally, let's say, and Lee had taken 1 extra turn to develop his Glowfly Swarm, this is just yet another reason why this matchup has been historically miserable for the Demon Hunter, because even if you do manage to get your best possible anti-aggro swing with the Glowfly Swarm coming down, they can quite often just Warglaives it on curve, and that is now certainly not an option in the matchup because of the increased mana cost.
I think at this point, if the Glowfly was played on curve, the Warglaives is probably just lethal outside of everything else.
Yeah, fair point.
And these are the hard turns for me, almost in any matchup versus Druid. How much is enough when you're trading off Glowflies?
Time grows short.
The Balmage trades for sure. I think the Battle Fiend might end up going face, though. It's just a question of whether this is a value trade on the Shadow Weaver or not. Yeah, this looks about right to me. Mars on point as always.
I do feel a lot of players actually go for either all trades or no trades. The in-between bit I think is very difficult to get right. It's very easy to overtrade or under if you decide to make some kind of middle play. But Lee is going to be able to use that second Glowfly to refill the board once again. And now it's back to Muzzy to see what he can make of this hand. He does draw the Mana Saber to be able to play something, but that second slice might just be used just to kill off another minion here.
Okay, this time can I talk about Warglaives and how it would have been relevant before the mana cost nerf? Is it more important this time around?
I think it would have been quite relevant, yeah.
Okay. Muzzy doing his best, though, continue to pick apart as much as this is, and it really is just kind of an instant replay of the previous turn. Value trading with a Bone Chewer Brawler. Problem is, he's already expended most of his useful trading minions on the previous turn. There's no more value trade from the Frozen Shadow Weaver. There's no more Blazing Battle Mage to be able to throw into a 2-2 and not feel too bad about it. every one of these trades, apart from the Bone Chewer Brawler, is going to hurt Muzzy's soul.
Can he ever not trade and just say this will be enough and go face? Well, yes, he can. This is the very quick answer to that. Savage
Hello.
Draw, though. Oh.
That is simply
Lethal? Yeah,
Yep.
I was going to say. A lot of the time, I don't even count when you see the second Savage Draw, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, Sol, because it is
Pheno sub, I see.
it is so much damage on here that the game just ends. And you saw the difference a Warglaves would have made there for Muzzy. If we were living in a pre-nerf world, that would have been able to clean up some of those treants and would have made that just not possible for Lee. It just wouldn't have happened in that way. The game would have continued or would have been over, but in Muzzy's favor.
Yeah, and I made the point earlier that I've seen several players on Twitter saying that one of the big things they regret about their lineup, players tweeting as they are eliminated from the tournament or as they were dropping out or as they're picking up their third loss or whatever, excluding them from top 8, they're tweeting and saying one of the things that I'm regretting about my lineup is that I have Warglaves in my Demon Hunter. I think I should have left it out entirely. Because as the more hours we get under the belt with this new Demon Hunter, there aren't many matchups where that Warglaves is now super relevant. And you can kind of chalk Druid off that list to an extent, because that's one of the really big boons for Warglaves, is that if you didn't just kill them with the perfect Battle Fiend Beaming Sidekick curve and just deal 1 million damage in the early game, and they did get to try and stabilize with the Glowfly Swarms, Warglaves is just one card. It's just essentially an AoE in that situation, where on top of that, if you have Satyr Overseer or Battle Fiend or anything that gets paid off by attacks on the board, not only are you wiping their counter push with the Glowfly Swarm, you're also just progressing your own game plan by pushing more damage with Battle Fiend or flooding the board yourself with Satyr Overseer. So you saw there the increased cost of the Warglaves. That absolutely was the difference between winning and losing that game for Muzzy. It was that simple.
Yeah, and the problem is, again, just touching on just the Druid matchup once more, is even against a Mount Seller turn a bit later, you'd still probably need Warglaves plus Twin Slice or Hero Power, which then makes the Warglaves kind of cost 7 or 8 maybe, which is just as slow, if not too slow. But enough of that. Let's move on to a different matchup. We have Muzzy on the top on the Highlander Hunter and Lee on the bottom on this Quest Warlock. So going into this, I feel like the Hunter is favored, but that is by no means to say Lee doesn't have any game here with some extreme levels of healing.
Yes. Not the best looking opening hand. Nether Breath unactivated right now by the dragon. The flipped card is an Aranasi Broodmother. If you are just joining us and haven't seen this unique and wonderful spectator bug that we kind of have at the moment, but anytime you see a flipped card like that, that is a Broodmother in hand for the player.
Meanwhile, in Muzzy's opening hand,
pain.
There is just every kind of option of death for Lee, isn't there? There's just either curve, he can coin out 2-drop into 2-drop and just have the Blazing Battle Mage fit in whenever, mainly because these 2-drops could be aggressive. Going to hold on to the coin, which I don't mind at all, but just the fact he had the option there is insane. Muzzy just has threats for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I like holding on to the coin for the simple reason of, Dark Skies is the card that you have to worry about. And Dark Skies is a card that you're going to beat by coining out 4 or 5 health minions 1 turn sooner than they're going to come down. Generally, if you break down the way this matchup lines up, you can't really beat Dark Skies if the Warlock is just tapping each turn in the early game, unless you coin out a big minion like Dragonbane, for example, a turn early, just the way things line up. So I think the coin will be preserved for opportunities at that a little bit down the line. I am actually a soothsayer, Raven.
Yeah, I'm impressed, I'm going to be honest. And also the fact that the coin into Dragonbane not only is the protection you talked about, but it's still comfortable for Muzzy. Sometimes when you make this play, you end up having to play like weird off-curve plays afterwards, but there's still just Fairy Dragon Hero Power the turn after, which is more than good enough.
Yep. So yeah, if you break it down now, 5 health on board. If you coin out the extra 5, that's 10 health on board. There are currently 7 cards in hand for Lee, which means he draws an 8th next turn, and he gets to life tap into a 9th. But even if he were able to do that, he wouldn't then have mana for the Dark Skies to follow that up. So this is the best possible way to overwhelm the removal from the Warlock.
And that's if they have Dark Skies.
Blood Mage Nether Breath! Oh, that's nutty! That's absolutely insane off the top for Lee. What an answer.
It is very good, but it had to be, right? Like, Muzzy still has plenty of follow-up. Now he just has Fairy Dragon Felmore if he really wants it. He has plenty of follow-up and plenty more pressure, and Lee pretty much needed that to survive, not even really get ahead.
Let none survive.
Yeah, but step number 1 has been achieved, and that was taking care of the Dragonbane, because if you left that thing up, you can pretty much say goodnight. He did already have the Nether Breath Coil option, even without the Blood Mage draw. It's just the Blood Mage is so much more efficient in terms of the extra point of healing, in terms of the extra cycle that he still gets off the Blood Mage, and still now has the Mortal Coil available for the cheaper cycle somewhere down the line, or if he wants to pair that with Moarg Artificer. So it was a really, really nice draw off the top. But you are right in pointing out that there are bigger problems to solve still from this point for Lee.
I have no time for games.
Very interesting play there. What do you make of this spear? Because there were cleaner options, i.e. just the 2/2 drops or 2-drop hero power. There were bigger minions he could have played. He doesn't have Varanus in hand for that. So why spear here?
I think this is probably the reason, right? The Crazed Netherwing that's coming down, he really wasn't capable of generating a board that gave many protection against this. You can argue maybe Dormant Minion is protection in that scenario, but it's still not any immediate tempo being developed. So maybe Muzzy's just saying, hey, my board is good enough. I will pull out the removal from my opponent even if I play nothing. So he essentially just played nothing that turn and just took the turn off to develop the spear instead.
It does allow him to trade cleanly into this Netherwing too with the help of the Griffin.
Yep.
And still follow up with a 2-drop. So Muzzy, again, just even with coin, even with some strange turns, is just continually putting on pressure. And Lee, although he does have this Kartuk Defender, Muzzy still has Bran. He now has the Scale Rider that isn't active yet, but also has the Zigzaw as well for just some on-demand damage. It's looking still pretty good for Muzzy.
Ooh, bit of healing there from the Upside Down Broodmother, and now this Kartuk Defender is going to start to put in work, and I've made no secret of the fact that I am not a fan of this card in this deck. I am an Abyssal Summoner gamer through and through, but certainly in this position, it looks pretty attractive, but honestly, an Abyssal Summoner would look equally attractive in this scenario, if not far more so.
I will say, specifically in this matchup, I feel like Kartuk is a little bit better because it buys time to get to cleaner AoE turns, and Hunter can get to the point where they are just kind of ran out of stuff. And with that extra heal, it means you're not normally dead to just hero powers, and then the Warlock can secure the board or secure the game. So, although I do agree, I prefer Abyssal easily in the list, Kartuk does okay in this specific matchup.
Okay, so you hedged your sentence towards the end. I was going to say I disagree with you. I do certainly agree that Kartuk does okay in this matchup, but you started off saying that it might be better in this matchup, which I'm not even convinced of. I think I disagree with that as well, because I think what Abyssal Summoner does crucially is kind of give you alternate win conditions and just tempo plans and ability to just steal the board and have big minions that your opponents can't answer. It's another huge 0-mana life tap in a lot of positions when you get to that point, whereas I think without the Abyssal Summoners in your deck, you're kind of very linearly set on having to achieve your combo game plan, which is actually really, really hard to do against aggro most of the time, right? Like, you need to find time to be able to do that, and that's what aggro doesn't give you, whereas the Abyssal Summoners can actually just give you a win condition, which is just play a big idiot on curve and snowball from there. Which personally, maybe it's just a playstyle thing in the way that I play some of the aggro matchups, but for me, I've still had plenty of success with Abyssal Summoners in aggro matchups.
And I'm not saying it's much better at all. I just think that Hunter, if it does its game plan, it will be pressuring early, and then the Abyssal Summoner, there's Rotnest Drake, there's Varanus, there's a couple of ways it can just delete the Abyssal Summoner, whereas if they delete the Kartuk, well, you've healed for 6, right? So you still push out of that kind of health total, and you see Lee on 27, and Lee's been getting hit this game, right? And he's still on 27, so he does have time.
For sure.
And I believe we have a slight spectator issue because that was definitely Bran being played and hitting face.
Yes.
I can feel it. But so we will get that checked out and fixed for you. But I'm pretty sure that was just Muzzy going. It's turn 7. I have Bran. I can go face. This is all looking good. And again,
And then
just
I can
judging
tell you from there that Lee then top-decked Twisting Nether by the looks of things, just based on the animation that went off on Muzzy's side of the board. This is a unique challenge that I have not been presented with, casting a game of Hearthstone based entirely on the flipped card window of the top player's perspective.
We can do it, though, because that is just a Zigsaw Prime being played post-Twisting Nether, so that is just Muzzy going to be having 4/4/4s on the board empty, and it is going to be on Lee to be able to defend against that. Looks like he's going to go for the plot twist and hopefully try and get the Kelodan out and then back in again. I imagine is the ultimate draw there.
Mm-hmm. But yes, as we start to get more degrees of separation away from the initial board state, this is proving somewhat difficult to do. So hopefully we can refresh this spectator feed as soon as possible.
So overall here, it is obviously tough to see without what's going on, but I do like Muzzy's game plan overall in just basically just keeping the pressure on, because the second you give the Warlock some time to actually just even maybe like one turn off or one slow turn, if there's heal or any threats generated, because it is a matchup where you can potentially just drop a Malagos as well if there's that kind of wiggle room available, then that's when you can start to get in trouble as Hunter, because they start just doing the Warlock starts doing just more powerful stuff in general. Hunter starts running out of cards, so you're relying on just whatever you've got plus hero powers, and if there's Nether Breaths left and maybe even a Moarg, that's when the Warlock can go, okay, you've got me down to 12-ish, boom, there's the heal, 20 plus health, I've got stuff, you've got 2 cards in hand, can you actually finish this game? And outside of Bran, outside of maybe Nagrand Slam, the cards on their own don't really exist in Hunter, do they, to finish out games like that?
Yeah, and a lot of the big hitters had, of course, already been used, with Dynatoma Brand coming down, and we assume getting Twisting Nethered off the top from Lee, just based on our snapshot of the animations in that Frozen Spectator, was then followed up with Zigsaw Prime. But I think that's the big question as to where we are going to rejoin this game, if we do even rejoin the same game in progress, is how good was the answer to that Zigsaw Prime follow-up on Lee's side? Because outside of that, Muzzy's hand was starting to look a little bit threat-light. The Primordial Explorer might have been able to pick up another big heavy hitting threat on Muzzy's side, but if that just whiffed a little bit, and maybe a timely Dark Skies or Moarg Nether Breath, as you were saying, was to come down from Lee, and then Lee might just be taking control of that game.
Yeah, we do apologise for the issue. Spectator seems to have been playing up the last day or so for us, so we are doing our best and going to get into the game as quickly as possible. And hopefully we can at least see some kind of game state. Okay, there we go. So it looks like Lee did manage to fend off the Zigsaw Prime. And now this is kind of getting to the point I was talking about, where Muzzy just doesn't have much, and Lee isn't dead yet. So although there's the Onyxia, Lee's got tons of resources available to him right now, and most importantly, I think that post-plot twist we saw a turn or so after we froze did get him his quest activated.
Yeah, Lee is extremely not dead yet, and with quest completed, life tap available, Zephyrus active, which means Dragon Queen Alexstrasza will also be active as well, if we haven't missed it in our little excursion away from the game. So yeah, Lee certainly has some options here, but that Onyxia pickup from Muzzy I do very much like. I believe, I'm not sure if you guys got it as well, but we actually had some sound going on there as we were stalling to be able to get back into the game with the fixed spectator, and I believe I heard Rain of Fires being used, which might have lent into Muzzy's option there of picking up Onyxia as his option for refill.
Yeah, I think one was definitely Dark Skies as well.
It could have been Dark Skies, and so yeah, maybe
I think it was Dark Skies.
Maybe the second Rain of Fire is still available. Then we can see that one is available for Lee, but I think it might just end up getting used. Yeah, I kind of like it.
Do you like? To sound a little bit strange, do you like the coil first?
I think the coil is certainly getting used, and then he will reevaluate based on what happens this turn.
Okay.
Yeah, just wants to take ball control here, which totally respect. Muzzy's going to need an answer. and does not have it.
Yep, only 6 damage total to go face, so not lethal quite yet. And most importantly, no way to kill the Malagos. And now my turn to feel like a prophet, Sottle, because I did kind of mention that in this matchup, once you get to this state where the Hunter's lost the board, you kind of can just play Malagos. Obviously, he did something with Malagos on the turn he played it, but there are not that many things that kill it out just straight from hand for Hunter.
Nope. Yeah, you're generally looking at the Rotnest Drake, Varanus plus some source of damage, or the ever-present Zephyrus that is always the answer to those questions that nobody asked. And now, even beforehand, this was just simply lethal with the Zephyrus giving the damage to end the game, but Rain of Fire is going to add on top of that as well. Pick your poison, Lee. Simple fireball to the face, 11 damage buffed up. Of course, Zephyrus is recognizing spell damage from the Malagos, so it gives all of the options to end the game. And as much as we may have missed there in the middle of that, it did look like a pretty impressive performance there from Lee. But I think Muzzy, from what we saw as well, played the game as well as he possibly could. I really like the way he sequenced his early game plays. But I go back to that really clutch draw from the Blood Mage Thanos, just picking up that extra point of healing. And yes, I will confess that Kartut Defender, again, with the couple of turns that we missed, it would have seemed like Kartut Defender really did make a difference there, because you can subtract 6+ points of health from Lee's total, and then suddenly maybe just Muzzy plays the game differently, starts squeezing in a hero power here and there, and then maybe that Corrosive Breath that we saw drawn at the end alongside the Unleash the Hounds, maybe in a different game state where Kartut Defender didn't provide the healing, maybe that's just pushing lethal towards the end of the game instead.
Yeah, it's exactly what Hunter or Highlander Hunter doesn't want to happen, is you get all this early damage in, and then your opponent just resets health in the game, which, you know, the Warlock can easily do with Moag, Nether Press, and so on. So that kind of, you know, the Kartok helps towards that, because then all the work you've done early on, they AoE it down, reset their health, and now you're playing their game. It's like Derek and I were talking about earlier in the Warlock and Druid matchup. If the Druid survives the ramp advantage long enough to get to match on like 10 mana or close to, then suddenly the game looks a lot better for the Warlock, because then they're playing the big game, especially when it's post-quest.
And now just the Demon Hunter left to win with for Lee, for a result that will lock him up into the top 8. And I mentioned earlier, Lee digging out a pretty storied history for himself. We have seen him feature in HCT Championship events under our old system, and now currently in the China Gold Team system, which is kind of their equivalent process to Grandmasters in terms of qualifying their players through to Worlds. He is currently on a very, very successful streak, 15-6 overall in game score, not match score, which I think ranked him second overall in that league, and has put him in the playoff position, which if he wins that playoff, he will be one of the China representatives that will be going to the World Championships for this year.
Yeah, pretty big deal for Lee, and this game could be as well, because we very recently seen Muzzy make a comeback from 0-2 down, so it is very, very possible, especially with a player of his caliber. But Lee does have a pretty solid opening hand. Then again, though, so does Muzzy. So who you, even just looking at the hands as they stand, Sol, who are you favouring here? Because I know a lot of players who think Rogue is plenty fine against Demon Hunter.
I mean, in this particular game, before this beaming sidekick became a factor, I would have given you an incredibly definitive Rogue answer, because backstab coin Van Cleef while clearing the biggest minion off of your opponent's board, insane. Now, not quite as impactful. I still think it's incredibly strong, but the Frozen Shadow Weaver there following up will leave an equivalent amount of power in play to be able to contest the Edwin Van Cleef, and the damage will continue to be pushed. So, yeah, you can even see Muzzy's deciding to turn this down, because the backstab doesn't really do anything particularly impactful on the board, and might just be greeding this out for an even bigger Van Cleef on the following turn.
And it does show a good level of discipline, and honestly a play I don't think tons of players would make, especially just your average ladder player, in that you could have the mindset of, okay, well, backstab coin Van Cleef, you get rid of the 1-2 and the Van Cleef beats the Battlemaster, right? So there is a level of logic there, but as you pointed out, I think Muzzy can greed this for a much higher impact turn. It's just when and how he does, because we often see that the choice is almost always one or the other when it comes to Quest Adventurer or Van Cleef. There aren't that many common turns in the early game, at least, where you can make some kind of impactful play that includes both of these.
Right. And now Muzzy was leaping to start this turn with the Ferrocat, I believe, at the start, but I think he's stopped to evaluate what that Praise Galakron draw means for him instead. Because he can choose to go fishing for a Lackey on the target that he's going to end up backstabbing anyway, so no harm done in terms of buffing up the attack on the other side of the board. But I think after much deliberation, he's going to go with the Ferrocat line instead.
And also pulls the trigger on this Van Cleef turn. Going to make it that little bit bigger and a little bit more annoying to deal with. And by a little bit, I would just mean a lot as an AA. Can get frozen out though by Lee if he chooses to commit this Shadow Weaver. Does have this Battle Mage too to fill out the curve and doesn't make him have to Hero Power or Twin Slice.
Right. But now Lee knows that he is on a clock. Seems weird to say, as of course Lee is the player functioning as the aggressor here, so it feels like Muzzy is on the clock, but that 8-8 Van Cleef will overwhelm Lee eventually if he doesn't get on with it and push through enough damage to be able to be ending the game sooner rather than later with that Twin Slice and Glade Bound Adept damage that he has in hand. The damage of Demon Hunter not quite what it used to be before this recent wave of nerfs, with a lot of decks choosing to cut out Metamorphosis after the nerf hit that.
Yeah, and it's going to be tough because we're obviously getting an expansion fairly soon. But yeah. I am interested just to see where Demon Hunter goes. And I was just doing a bit of addition there, and I think if you play this game out by if Lee just ignores the board, goes say all face, swing face, glaive bound, and then hero power, twin slice, second slice, attack face next turn, I think he ends up one off. So although it's close, it's not really guaranteed. Different things can happen, of course. Shield of Galakron we can see in Muzzy's hand would change those numbers. But with Lee on 30, I wouldn't be overly upset for him if he just went face and decided to try and finish this.
Yeah, and it's a huge board he's generating as well. Like it's not like he's just throwing fireballs at his opponent's face. He's going face while developing huge minions as well. So the Edwin Van Cleef can't really start just going face back the other way, although I hesitate to say that if anyone can't go face, Muzzy's probably not the person to be telling that to, because he will find a way, as he's evidenced on multiple occasions, to squeeze out a face attack if he really feels like he can.
Yeah, I like this from Lee.
Agreed.
He even and this was before I even saw the Skull of Gul'dan, which is a great backup tool that might sort of snipe him a win as well, post Twin Slice, or maybe just next turn anyway. So
Seal Fate here shows promise, but you'd have to get a pretty dreamy Lackey out of it, although most of them are fairly solid. Kobold is strong, Titanic is strong.
What do you think about just double trade and Shield of Galakron? Is that ever stronger?
I'm really hungrily searching for lines where I get to smash face with my Edwin Van Cleef. That's just how greedy I am.
Unfortunately, I just don't think you can, or I don't think Muzzy can. It hurts because of course, but this is what makes the play strong, right? This is why Lee was I'll say allowed to go face.
Yep. And now the Twin Slice and the Hero Powers coming through for 6 damage. Alongside that Blazing Battle Mage means that Lee is going to put one of the America's Region's Kings potentially out of top 8 and secure himself a position. And honestly, this goes as a little microcosm of something that I've been talking about, which is a shifting in power dynamic where, honestly, the China region was treated largely as a joke by a lot of other players and a lot of other regions in terms of what we saw from them in our limited experience as the Western audience, looking at what China was putting up in terms of World Championship qualifiers. Not many World Championship performers, not many. Their performances in HCT seasonal championships, generally not that great. But I think over time, because they have this kind of consistent system where they are playing high-level high stakes Hearthstone all year round. It seems like it really has become a breeding ground for top players, and I think the power dynamic is shifting. Where maybe I would put China now as the second strongest region overall behind Europe, and I think with the favorable time zone on their side here in this Masters Tour, and the fact that they don't have to travel, no visa issues or anything like that to worry about, I think we are starting to see more and more Chinese players making a good run at getting deep into these Masters Tour events, and they see just a small example of it. Lee booking his place in top 8, perhaps at the expense of Muzzy.
Yep, really impressive overall. I really liked how both players played that series, and honestly, it's just a shame it couldn't go on a bit longer, because those are two players I'd watch play again, right? You've always got to appreciate Muzzy and his play style, but also just Lee seeing that line for Demon Hunter saying, you know what, there aren't that many things Muzzy could even possibly do to cause any issues, and there were so many good draws for Lee to propel him further into that win. So congratulations to him, but we've got more coverage for this round, but we're going to go to a break while we set those matches up. So don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back with more Masters Tour Asia Pacific.